Herman Weintraub. I'm an executive director for GFT. I am head of the buy-side technology consulting unit.
I'm Grewal. I'm the head of strategy for capital markets and private wealth for GFT North America.
So there are two overarching themes in the asset management space, and this has been going on for quite some time. The first is of shrinking returns. This shrinking in returns is leading to firms needing to cast a wider net in their attempts to find and drive further alpha. What this is driving is a hybridization of the space. People are looking to larger geographies, and they're looking to wider asset class mixes. So instead of a firm focusing on one or a couple of specific strategic investment directions, they're going across the full spectrum. The second theme is increasing competition. And increasing competition is driving efficiency needs in the market. So it's not just enough to have a top-line return. You now need to be able to outperform the competition with that same return. So we're now looking at operational gains in people, process, and technology. From a technology perspective, there's been a shift in the themes over the decades. In the 90s, we were all about spot technologies and driving information into specific areas. So we were looking at CRM systems, at OMSs, and gaining specific information in specific places. The 2000s were about golden source of information. So it was about driving security masters, about driving client masters, and the like, and getting that principal piece of data that could be spread across the organization. The current decade is now about how to deal with information throughout the organization. And it's in form that problem spans a number of different dimensions. For some firms, it's the sheer volume of data, terabytes, petabytes of data. For other firms, it's access to data across multiple different silos. For other firms, it's dealing with data across different areas of the spectrum, from one side of the hybridized investment spectrum to the other. It's dealing with structured and unstructured data. So these problems are really what we're seeing across the asset management space today, and addressing them in each of these dimensions are the challenges that are occurring.
I think if we then actually look across the spectrum of what the themes that are coming out within the industry, we're starting to see a lot of the things that have happened within other industries, such as retail banking, such as just the standard kind of retail space, beyond banking actually. And everybody now has an iPhone. Everybody has an expectation that their experience is digital. And I think that theme of digitization and that change within the industry is really starting to have an impact within this industry. I think that impact will actually start to manifest itself initially as portals. I think people are starting to see, hey, look, we want portals. We want to have a more centralized view of what we're seeing. We want to have greater transparency. But actually, I think that will start to actually drive into things like having iPad apps, having iPhone apps, having all of the standard kind of things that you would expect in the current digital world that we live in. I think to get there, though, there's a whole variety of things, and Herman touched on a number of them in terms of the data, in terms of the systems, but actually some of the things that need to change in terms of the operational efficiency of the organizations is pretty significant. To get to that place where you have a truly seamless application which somebody can use on an iPhone or an iPad does actually require some back office changes. It's not just changing your systems, it's also changing your processes and your people, and changing the way that you do things. And that theme, I think, will start to really push itself in the next 5 years or so as we start to see certain people leading the pack in terms of what they'll produce from a digital perspective. So some of the things that have also added to this are that now it's not just a case of actually supporting your customers in a more digital way or giving them a better experience. It's also your employees. You've got to have both a good footprint internally as well as externally. Your system users are used to using iPhones. They're used to having a very digital experience, and they come into work and they're sitting there looking at green screens. It's not going to really work, right? People are going to get frustrated, and your best talent is going to leave. There's got to be a change in the industry to start retaining the best talent within the industry. And the way that you do that is by increasing your employee experience as well as your customer experience, and they've got to be in line. And that manages and touches on a whole variety of things, as well as operational efficiency, but also the approach that you take to projects, the approach that you take to actual internal change. And obviously people like to talk about agile and lean, and those are great buzzwords, but actually some of the behavioral change you have to make and cultural change you've got to make in your organization is very aligned with those kind of topics. And you put the two together and you've got a very, very powerful bedrock of an organization with a great digital technology, both internally and externally, and a set of employees who are very happy to be doing what they want to be doing within your organization. So if I think of regulation as kind of one of the core themes that's been on everybody's lips in the last couple of years, if we look over to where the banks are and what's happened in the regulatory space there, it's almost entirely about transparency. Dodd-Frank was about transparency. All of the new things around BCBS 239, they're all about transparency. And MiFID 2 and Basel 3, again, very much a view of how do we get the right level of transparency within the industry. If we take a wider view outside of just banking and the asset management space, you start to notice there have been a number of events within the world, such as things that have happened in Panama, things that have happened with FIFA, that kind of touch on a lack of transparency. I think those kind of events are going to start forcing a view of or a need for more transparency within this space. I think if you look at the unbundling of fees, it's all in that direction, and I think it's only going to get stronger and heavier. So I think there's got to be a very natural view from the asset managers and the custodians to start looking at regulation as a bit more of a serious topic within their space. It is coming, it is likely to have an impact, and if you're not ready for it, if you haven't got the right data, the right organizational infrastructure, and the right technical infrastructure, you're really going to struggle with it. We've seen banks struggle with it, and they're still figuring out how do they make this business as usual.
Right. And regulation has really been about trust and transparency in this space. From Madoff to Panama, it's investors looking to be able to trust the firms they're leaving their money with. It's the public and government looking to have an understanding of who's investing and for various purposes why. But now, particularly in our Panama paper environment, what we're probably looking at is renewed need for knowing your client. And that's going to require yet more understanding of your root data. And it's bringing together data, once again, from across the different areas. Today, a lot of the KYC activity falls to administrators and it falls to manual process, and that needs to change.
I think there's a very natural place for utilities in the KYC space. There's a whole variety of them in the industry already. I think the real question will be which one will win. And then based on which one will win out, we'll all move to that, right? And it isn't necessarily about who's best at this. It's going to be who's quickest and who has the best branding and marketing, unfortunately.
And who can most accurately address whatever particular nuance of regulation comes through.
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah, I think the agility for each of those utilities and their nimbleness, as Herman touched on, will make a difference. I think we've all learned the lessons of you don't need to do everything in-house. It's not necessarily going to give you a market edge. And if it doesn't, then why would you spend a lot of money building things yourself, or even creating organizational structures yourselves when you can actually focus on the core of your business instead? I think there's a lot of opportunity with new technology. I think if you look at some of the new things that are coming from things like blockchain, they're creating trust. And that's really the fundamental tenet of what blockchain does. It creates a level of trust which you didn't have before. And as Herman touched on in terms of the regulation, it's all centered around trust and transparency. And those are kind of some very fundamental aspects of what blockchain does. Ignoring the technology aspect and just focusing on the concept of distributed trust, I think there's going to need to be a change from the custodians to actually start embracing some of those things. Least of all because if they don't, somebody else will. And it isn't going to be too hard for somebody to come in and prove that they can be trustworthy in a space where so far only a number of individuals or organizations have been shown to be trustworthy. I think that need of innovation within the space is going to be really driven by the ones who are jumping forward and investing in that innovation, and are starting to focus on what are the new technologies they could do things with, but actually what are the specific areas that they could focus on. So I mean, we've done a number of pieces of work around where is blockchain helpful, and it isn't the solution to every problem. And I think there's a lot of people who want to believe it is. It is a great solution for a number of very, very specific areas, such as fraud, such as specifically improving your operational efficiency. in areas such as where you've got disparate data and it isn't necessarily well connected. But outside of some of those, it becomes much, much harder to actually see value. And the investment cycles in any of these kind of new technologies are always a spike at the beginning, and then you start seeing value later on. And with the increasing regulation, that can be hard to live through that investment process. But you've really got to get the value out of this and to survive through to the end.
Before many of these firms even begin to embrace some of these disruptive technologies, and in order to enable them to take on some of the challenges of creating new technology with blockchain or with other technologies, first, a lot of them need to clean up their own houses. Firms are now dealing with technology portfolios that span generations and multiple different organizations in their heritage. The process of simplifying that system of applications is a necessary requirement for them to move forward with newer technologies. And there are proven methodologies for application simplification that can be leveraged by these organizations to help them enable their technology organizations to move forward.
I think some of the big ones that are going to be really impactful in the next couple of years are things like cloud. I mean, you hear a lot of people talking about cloud. It's been something that people have gone on and on about, and now we're seeing very heavily used in the retail space. I think it's a very natural transition for financial services organizations to take, in that they've got large systems with lots of data, and so far they've focused so heavily on having the internal infrastructure to support those things because of privacy and trust. I think that level of security that's been needed is now available outside of the banks, outside of the asset managers and the custodians, and it's possible for them to actually start moving some of these core functions out of house, much like I touched on earlier, and into the cloud. And I think the cloud will give them huge levels of ability to have redundancy, to have ability to scale very quickly, and actually the ability to actually reduce their overall OpEx cost. And that's really going to have a big impact to their overall bottom line, but also their ability to then set their fees at a more competitive level. Outside of things like cloud, one of the other big topics that I've found interesting is actually augmented and virtual reality, which I think is probably more like a 5 or 10 year topic. But this year you're seeing a number of kind of core changes in the VR space with the Oculus and the Vive, and even some of the stuff around PlayStation. These are things that are going to fundamentally change the way that we work. I don't think they'll change this year. I don't think they'll change probably in the next 2 or 3 years. But as they become more commonplace, like we've seen with the digital revolution with the iPhone and what Apple have done, I think we'll see a lot of change with what Facebook and what HTC are going to do with the Vive and the Oculus. And that change will eventually resonate in the financial services industry. I think there's an opportunity for people to take that up earlier. If you look at the cost of having the equivalent of like a massive pit of monitors versus having a VR headset, it's completely ridiculous. The cost difference is unbelievable. And beyond the strange feeling of that you're wearing a headset and you look a bit funny, there's actually a really great, powerful usability story there, where you can start doing things which you just could never do before. Your user experience goes away from having something just in a 2-dimensional space on a monitor to actually having everything in a 3-dimensional space and being able to just actually react to things by moving your head. So things that we thought could only happen in films or in the cinema are now actually able to happen right now in real life. And some of these technologies can do this right now. Obviously, I think as I said, the expectation cycle around financial services will be longer, but it will come. And I think if people are at the forefront of that and they provide apps to support those kind of things, they're going to be able to gather a market which just won't be available to them otherwise.
And speaking of cloud technologies, yes, there's no question that there is adoption within the asset management community of various cloud technologies, but we need to keep in mind, like any other technology, it's not a cure-all. There's not one cloud solution for technology. And you need to remember that there's a lot of technology work that needs to occur in order to port various different applications, legacy applications, up to the cloud. It's not a trivial endeavor, and it's not a panacea. So with that in mind, embrace it, but embrace it for the right reasons.
I think one of the really powerful things that technology consultants can bring to the table for any financial services firm is actually our ability to be unbiased in what we're doing. So we're coming in without an agenda beyond what we've been asked to do, and that's very much focused on getting the right technology for the right problems. We aren't there to push blockchain if it isn't the right solution. We aren't there to push cloud if it isn't the right solution. We're there to actually get the right solution to the right problem. And that ability to look at it from a very pragmatic view of what is the quickest thing and the most, with the best time to market and the best return on investment is really, really powerful for any client. Every organization has politics, and having somebody coming in or having a team of people come in who are unpolitically aligned can be very, very helpful to get to the right solution, to get the right answer. And on top of that, we have a slightly different view in that we may not just be looking introspectively of what is in the organization, we'll be looking across the industry and what we've seen elsewhere. So we can look at industry changing effects within retail banking or insurance that may be transportable to the asset management custody space.
So particularly within this space where issues of trust and transparency have come up that we've touched on before, where these can be disruptive concepts and can change the landscape and can change the players, it's important to have an industry-wide view that a technology consultancy can bring to you.